business someday? You know, surveys show that almost everybody fantasizes about owning their own business. And there are a lot of reasons why. What are some of the reasons why people think, I want to own my own business? Financial freedom is a huge one, right? They feel like I'm trapped or I'm caught in this world of work. It's hard to find a job, it's hard to make money. So a big reason to want to start your own business is financial freedom. What's another reason? You hate your boss, or you want to be your own boss, right? How many of us have worked for somebody that wasn't the greatest person in the world? So the idea of having our own business is exciting and empowering because we have the chance to be our own boss, to set our own direction for our own organization. Well, why else do people want to become business owners?
Schedule flexibility.
Absolutely. Bring your own schedule. You know, a lot of us have jobs which have precise times and hours, and you've got to be there a certain day or a certain time, and that can be frustrating because you can't be flexible, you can't go on vacation when you want to go on vacation, you can't pick up your kids. It's hard to be able to control your time. These are all important reasons. And if you look at people who are great business owners who've had incredible success, they have powerful reasons too. You know, I always look at Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the co-founders of Apple Computer, and I like them as elements of the story because they illustrate two very different reasons to start a company. Steve Jobs wanted to start Apple Computer because he wanted to, quote, make a dent in the universe. I love that quote, make a dent in the universe. And you think about what Apple Computer has done, not just with their computers, but with all their technologies, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad now, who's what I think coming out next. All of these technologies have made a dent, a transformation of the universe. Steve Jobs said he wanted to make products that weren't just good, but were insanely great. He's motivated by a passion to change the world in a way that he thinks is fair. But Steve Wozniak, his partner in starting the company, who was an engineer by training and by experience, wasn't really interested in changing the world. In fact, Wozniak wanted to start Apple Computer because he worked for Hewlett Packard. He was frustrated that he could not get time on the company computers to do his work. He thought, if I have my own computer at home, I get more done, and it'd be fun to play with. So he started Apple Computer with his friend Steve out of joy. He thought it'd be fun to have his own computer. And he was right. It was fun. It was also fun for millions of other people as well. So all of us want to start companies for different reasons. And all of us feel like the idea of having our own business is empowering and meaningful. Now, I'm a productivity consultant, and that means I help people become more productive, more efficient, more effective with their time. We go out to organizations and spend time analyzing what you do minute to minute, day to day, to figure out how you can become more empowered and more effective with your time. And in speaking to entrepreneurs, I think there are 4 essential components to a successful organization. The 4 components that matter more than anything else that you do. And I'll start with the least important. Now, you might be surprised to hear this, but I think the least important core component of a successful business is financial solvency for the business itself. Now, that might seem surprising. You might think, I got to have a lot of money to start a business, right? I got to borrow money, I got to save up money, I got to have lots of capital on hand. But if you look at companies that are successful today, financial solvency isn't always part of the equation. Sometimes the companies are large and they're insolvent, but they're rescued by the government, like in the case of General Motors or Chrysler in the 80s or whatnot. Sometimes companies are large and their financial solvency is based on cash on hand. Microsoft, for example, wildly successful software company, has hundreds of millions of dollars in cash in the banking reserves. Microsoft can run for over a year on cash reserves alone with no revenue coming in. But Facebook, on this other hand, is so close to the wire that in order to keep operating and expand their business, they've got to get a $500 million investment from Goldman Sachs. You know, that characterizes how 2 businesses that are both we perceive as successful and part of our daily lives have different perspectives on financial management. So you do have to have money to run a business, but not every business is based on having lots of money. So I think it's the 4th most important component. I think the 3rd most important component is product and service delivery. Now again, you might think to yourself, I've got to have a product that I deliver. I've got to make the gift baskets or provide the credit counseling or do the work of repairing vehicles or go out and provide marketing consulting, whatever it is I want to do. I have to do that to have a business. But again, the reality is that products and services are only part of a business. My friend Christian Anderson likes to say that a company that has a product but no customers is just a hobby. But if you have customers and no product, you have a business. If you have customers but no product, you have a business. We were talking earlier about the Hackers and Founders Group. And there's this sense in those organizations when we're trying to start new ideas that if the idea has enough merit, we can find customers for the idea before the product or service is fully realized. I remember that was the key distinction back in the dot-com days when I worked in the IT business. There were two kinds of dot-com businesses, those that invested millions of dollars in building products nobody wanted, and those that invested very little money in building products and services people were already willing to buy and struggling to deliver them. So I think product and service delivery are important, but not the most important component. Now the second most important component of any successful business, in my experience, and this is very high on the list but not the highest, is marketing and public relations. That's your marketing strategy. If you're going to sell products and services, if you're going to provide some value to your customers, you've got to communicate with those customers what it is that you want to do for them. You've got to find a way to share that message far and wide. But you've also got to find a way to share it precisely and appropriately to that audience. If your audience doesn't listen to the radio, spending thousands on radio ads is a bad use of your resources. If your audience spends all their time online, spending your money on online advertisements or online marketing campaigns might be a good use of your resources. If most of your customers come from referrals, joining networking groups like Rainmakers or B&I would be an incredibly valuable use of your resources. So our marketing strategy, I think, is critical and core to your business. But in my experience, and in my perspective, the most fundamental component, the most core function of anything you do in building your own business is your productivity. Your productivity is the engine of possibility. It's what makes you able to get things done day after day. You ever said to yourself, at the end of a day, a work day, maybe a work day for somebody else, gosh, I didn't get anything done today. You ever had that happen? Yeah. All of us have. Tom DeMarco once wrote that there are a million ways to lose a work day, but not a single way to get one back. Now, I think personally, I've found about 500,000 of those ways. Personally, I found them. It doesn't seem like that, but there's so many ways to lose a work day, so many ways to waste time. There's so many ways to fritter your efforts away on resources or activities that don't matter. We've also had the opposite experience, where you come home at the end of the day and you say, I got a lot done today. I was really successful. And it isn't always about making sales. Sometimes it's about customer service. It isn't always about financial management. Sometimes it's about spending money to help somebody else out. Recently, I got a call from a vendor who provided some marketing signs for us. And there was a problem with one of our signs. And she called me up and said, hey, listen, we've discovered a problem with your sign. We're going to send you a replacement unit. Just out of the blue. Now, that's really expensive for them to do. One, you have to have somebody paying attention. Two, you have to have someone call me. And three, you got to spend your own money to give your customer something they already paid for. That might sound like a terrible use of resources. But guess how good she felt at the end of the day? By providing an activity that had value to her. So I think the core of a successful business is that engine of productivity, that engine of progress. Those activities and tasks you do every day that help you move forward. Now, of all these things, financial aspects of your business, the product and service you deliver, the marketing PR campaign, and this fundamental component of productivity, how do you make that happen? Well, most of us understand that the basis of a successful workday is habits. How many people brushed their teeth this morning? Okay, now, how many people can't remember the last time they forgot to brush their teeth? I know I can't remember that day. I mean, we all brush our teeth every day, right? Now, why do we do that? It's a habit, right? You don't do it because it's part of, some strategic plan you have. It's not in your business plan, brush teeth every day. Maybe if you're a dentist, you could meet your plan, but probably not, right? You do it because it's a habit. Habits are the most fundamental way to build productive habits. Things which are important to us in our lives become habits. Now, sometimes habits happen because people force you to do it. I know I brush my teeth not because I want to, but because somebody made me do it when I was little. And bad habits, as well as good habits, happen for the same reason. You start to develop a pattern and you get stuck in that habit. So whether the drives your business forward. And if an engine consists of good habits, as John would point out, as an engine that sounds good because it's running well, you're going to move forward. But if it's knocking, if the timing is off, if there are bad components or broken aspects, then it's going to kind of move, but not in a positive way. And it will create more problems than you are solving. Now, habits are interesting because for most of us, they're very private. Very few people brush their teeth in front of an audience. In fact, if you watch TV, you really don't see people brushing their teeth very often, even in TV programs. And the reason is because habits are so personal and so automatic, they don't seem interesting, even though they really are the fundamental component of what makes productivity happen. So how do habits get transmitted? How do they get shared? How do they get passed from person to person? Well, in my view, the transmission of habits is another word. It's a word called culture. Now, let me ask you, everybody here probably had Thanksgiving dinner. And I bet you all had the same thing as your main course. What was the main thing you had? Turkey. We all had turkey for Thanksgiving dinner, right? Now, why do we have turkey?
Tradition.
It's tradition. Is turkey, somehow superior to be consumed on that day of the year? No, it's good every day, right? Turkey's good. Okay? So turkeys aren't better in November. In fact, it turns out the American turkey industry has a tremendous difficulty because 3/4 of all the turkeys are consumed on one day. They spend 10 months out of the year producing turkeys to be flash frozen for that one day of the year. Because we have a culture that says we consume turkeys on Thanksgiving. Now, we develop individual habits, individual patterns in our families about how we do these sorts of things. But in the larger sense, we as a culture, we as a community of Americans, get together at the end of November and have turkey because it's part of our culture. The transmission of habits happens as culture. Now, culture in a wide sense is what we do as a larger community. But culture in a smaller sense, inside a business, is how you share your habits with those around you. With your employees, with your business partners, with your networking contacts, with your customers, with your vendors. Culture is how you self-share those habits. If you have a habit, for example, of paying your bills on time, what will that communicate to your vendors? That you pay your bills on time, right? That you're a reliable person. What? That you're a good risk, right? What if you have a habit of working with your customers and constantly forgetting to return their phone calls and emails? What will that communicate to them? That you don't care. Well, they want to call you for the next level of service? Probably not. You communicate habits through culture. If you have networking partners who you meet with on a regular basis, but you're always late to meetings, you never follow up on opportunities, what do you communicate to them? They're not really interested, all right? But at the same time, if you have contacts, especially business partners, and you're always finding ways to work for them, always finding ways to improve their business and their opportunities, you have regular habits about following up with them and providing value, what do you communicate in that regard? A sense of importance, right? A sense of value. So culture, fundamentally, is about how we transmit habits. It's about how we connect what we do on a minute-to-minute, day-to-day basis with our business and those around us. Now, it's really hard to build habits. Anybody ever tried to quit smoking or lose weight? And it's hard, right? It's hard to build habits. It's also hard to create culture, because even if we have a habit, it's tough to get somebody else to do it. But there is something that is easy to do, which is to build artifacts. Artifacts are the visual aspects of culture in our society. If you have an artifact, it's a reason to do something. There's an old story about Thanksgiving dinner, as a matter of fact, or actually it's about a Christmas ham. And the Christmas ham every year is produced by following this complex recipe of seasonings and toppings. And then right before it goes in the oven, Mom always chops off the end of the ham and sticks it in the pan and goes in the oven. And one day, I go to Mom and say, Mom, why did you chop off the end of the ham? What does this have to do with the recipe? Why is this important? Does it make it taste better? And she goes, well, I don't know why I do it. It's just part of the recipe that I got from my mom. so, well, Grandma's there at the Christmas dinner, so we go ask Grandma, and Grandma says, well, you know, in all honesty, I don't know why either. It's my mother who told me to do that. I just got it from her. Well, great grandma's there, she's 98 years old, and so we go ask her, and she says, well, my hand was too small. That's the reason I chop off the other hand. So for generations, this component has been passed down, right? This habit has become culture because of an artifact. Artifacts, visual things in our lives, are the most powerful ways to transmit culture, most powerful ways to establish habits. It's hard to build culture, it's hard to build habits, but it's easy to create an artifact. Artifacts like a Post-it note, which reminds you of what to do. You ever put a Post-it note on the wall and say, don't forget to take out the trash? Is that more effective than trying to remember to take out the trash? It's really good. My wife does it to me all the time. She'll put a Post-it note that says, do this. And you know, it's just really hard to ignore that. It's easy for her to forget. We forget to forget. Honey, would you take the dog out? So there's an actual written note that says, take the dog out, things I love you. Boy, that's tough to ignore. That's a great way to build a habit. An artifact allows us to establish habits. Now, there are a lot of artifacts in the business world, and I want to talk about three today, three that will help you to become more productive, more efficient, more effective at work. And the first one is one you probably already have, which is your calendar. Who has a calendar they maintain? What do you put on the calendar? What's the purpose of the calendar? Appointments, right? People are going to meet. Lorraine and I are going to have coffee later, and there's an appointment right there which says meet Lorraine for coffee. And we think that's the value of a calendar, right? Is to keep track of where we are. Well, that's powerful because it helps to establish a habit. If it says 10 o'clock, and they're at 10 o'clock, then I have a good habit of being on time. But a calendar can be much, much more than appointments. Because for most of us, if our calendar is just appointments, what is on the calendar besides those appointments? Birthdays, special events, but mostly a lot of empty space. Right? You know, if you look at the average person's calendar, it's going to contain, you know, the coffee I'm having with Lorraine later this week maybe, or it's going to have the birthday that I have to remember, and then hours or days of empty space. And I love that because it sort of implies that really only things that have value are the appointments. All the rest of the time you're on vacation or doing whatever you want or watching TV, doesn't matter, right? But if we can train ourselves to be at appointments on time, using this artifact of the calendar, why can't we train ourselves to do other important things in our business and in our life using our calendar? You know, sometimes I'll find people say, you know what, I do go ahead and I put gym on my calendar. Go to the gym at 9 a.m. And you know, often I do go, because it's on the calendar. It's an appointment with myself. And I got to treat that appointment as serious thing as an appointment with somebody else. If you put gym on the calendar, why don't you put main projects on the calendar? In fact, anything that takes more than 15 minutes probably ought to be on your calendar. Because if it takes more than 15 minutes and it's on your calendar, when are you going to do it? How do you expect to get things done if you haven't reserved time to do them? You know, a calendar isn't just a record of appointments, right? It's a record of how you keep your time. Just yesterday I had an appointment with someone, and we talked about calendars, and specifically the idea that she's now looking at her calendar to reflect on where her time is going. She's realizing that because her calendar only has a couple of appointments, you know, see Robby at 1 o'clock, go to the gym at 4 o'clock, you know, have lunch with Fred at noon. All the rest of the time just gets pushed away into various activities. But by tracking her time with her calendar, she's able to see how long things actually take, what she's actually doing with her time. You know, calendar is so much more than just appointments. It's a way to understand how you use your most fundamental resource, the resource of time. Now, a calendar is also the basis of something else. Every day, at the end of the day, I take my calendar and I use it as a framework to write a journal entry about my day. And I do that for a very important reason. When you write about your day, you reflect on what you accomplished and what you failed to accomplish. I write about the appointments I had, I reflect on the conversations we had, I write my phone calls, about the activities I did, and I put a couple hundred words together about my experiences. And it's just a journal. It's just for me. It's a journal of the company. It doesn't go anywhere. But it allows me to have that sense of accomplishment at the end of each day, and also the sense of diffusion, of taking all of these ideas out of my head, which, believe me, is a mess. You don't want to see it there. Taking all these ideas out of my head and putting them into another place, a place where they can become more organized and codified. amazing phenomenon. The calendar is more than just an appointment book of where you're supposed to be. It's a way to keep a record of your most fundamental assets. Peter Drucker says, time is the most fundamental resource. If it cannot be managed, then nothing can be managed. Now, if a calendar is a way of keeping time, the other tool that we often see is this thing called the to-do list. Who has a to-do list? Who hasn't just crossed the thing off in months? Right? It's easy to create a to-do list, but sometimes it's hard to do things on the list. Well, I like to tell people that a to-do list is not a good way to think about what's in front of you. I like to use a different phrase, and it's a phrase which is very powerful. I call it a moral inventory. A moral inventory. Now, what's an inventory? What is an inventory?
A list of your stuff.
A list of your stuff, right? If you have an inventory of the things in your house, those are all things in your house that are actually meaningful and valuable. So your toothbrush, not in your inventory, right? But grandma's picture album is in your inventory, right? Your fine jewelry is in your inventory. Your fancy television is in your inventory. An inventory is a record of everything that you have which has value to you. And that's the important part. It has value to you. If it doesn't have value, it's not in your inventory. Now, the reason to-do list is a moral inventory because it represents what you think is important. What you think has a moral value in your world. A moral value to provide service to your customers, a moral value to provide service to your church or your community, a moral value to connect people in your lives. It's a record of what you think is really important. It's not just stuff you have to do, it's stuff that actually has moral value. And that means things that are in the past are also valuable, as well as things that are in the future. You don't really cross things off your moral inventory. You just move them from being parts of what you feel you've accomplished to things you hope to accomplish in the future. And that way it isn't about getting things done, but rather about making progress, about advancing forward. Now, a to-do list is sort of like a calendar in the sense that we want to chop things up into different areas of time. And I like to say that if it's on the to-do list, it either moves into that accomplished category or onto the calendar. Everything on my to-do list fits into one of two categories, or three categories. Either it's been completed and moved forward, or it's something which only lasts for a few minutes and I can do it, or it needs to be scheduled. If I want to hang out with Denise and we're going to have coffee, talk about something, my to-do item doesn't just say, follow Denise. It says, schedule time with Denise. So I know I'm going to need an hour of time, or 2 hours, or whatever we're going to need to talk about that issue. But in the same sense that your physical inventory in your house is organized by value, grandma's photos are probably way at the top, and the TV is somewhere over here, and then, maybe some clothes are lower down. The moral inventory of your list of activities or actions also has some hierarchy and some structure. It isn't just about cost. Grandma's pictures aren't worth very much at auction, are they? You can't sell them on eBay and make any money, but you wouldn't want to. In fact, they're more valuable than your jewelry, and than your clothing, and than, the Xbox games, more valuable than all that stuff. So your to-do list has to have that same sense of hierarchy. And whatever way you keep it, whether you keep it on Outlook or a piece of paper, you've got to divide it into, I need to do this today, or tomorrow, or next week, or next month. In the same sense, I've got to protect grandma's pictures in a lockbox. I've got to have the TV out in front. And if the clothes go, that's okay. A to-do list is a moral inventory. It describes what actually is valuable to you. Now, there's one more tool that I want to talk about, one more artifact that we can create. And it's an artifact all of us have. Some of us have it digitally, some of us have it in paper form, which is a list of the people that you know, your address book. Now, why is this artifact helpful?
Because you can't remember phone numbers anymore.
That's right.
Ever since the cell phone, don't ask me a number.
That's right. It's a memory aid, right? It helps you remember things you don't remember. Just like a calendar's a memory aid, and the to-do list is a memory aid. But it also is a record of something else. In your calendar is a list of appointments and activities where you spend your time. Your Your to-do list is a moral inventory of what actually matters to you. But what's in your address book? People, right? People. Now, when you're an entrepreneur and a business owner, sometimes it seems like you are all alone in your business. And it seems like the most important thing is making sales or producing your product or writing materials or whatever you need to do. But actually, you're not alone. In fact, I would say of all three of these artifacts, the most valuable, the most useful, and the greatest opportunity is in your address book. Because it is a list of all the people that you've come into contact with. And it's so easy to get distracted. You ever had to come home from an event or met somebody at a conference, a stack of business cards, and they kind of end up on your desk somewhere? It's so easy to lose track of that. You've had an experience, we had this experience this morning, where you see somebody you haven't seen in months or years, and you say, I know you, we saw each other before. Our mind, our ability to connect is tremendous. And the power of this artifact, the power of an address book to bring you together is tremendous. Now, I tell people that an address book certainly needs to have all the details, right? You want to have people's names and their phone numbers. You want to have their email addresses. You want to have the company they work for. You want to have their mailing address. I find mailing addresses are great. We were talking earlier, Kate was talking, we were talking about cards and the idea that you can send cards to people if you have their mailing address. But you also want to have other notes about them, where they used to work, what they used to do, the names of their kids and their dogs, and things that you might forget about them that are valuable and important. Because these are components of your relationship and your connection, which give you the power to reach out to someone. I'd like to go in there too and put down times that I saw that person. And that way, I have a reason. You know, I haven't seen so-and-so since this event. I haven't met with them since this time. That's a reason to give them a call. It's a reason to reach out to them. And let me tell you, one of the most amazing things that you can do is use what Tony Celso calls the magic words. Hey, I'm giving you a call because I was thinking about you and your business. Those are magic words because if you haven't talked to someone or seen them in a long time, and you really are thinking about them and their business, you're going to create a renewed connection in that moment. And a renewed connection is an opportunity to build a new relationship, to become more efficient, more effective, more productive together. Now, I want to mention three artifacts. You know, the to-do list, the moral inventory, the calendar, the record of timekeeping, and this address book, right? This collection of relationships. These are only three artifacts. But if you make an artifact for your business, an artifact is the beginning of establishing a habit. If you actually have a toothbrush and it's sitting on your counter, you're more likely to actually brush your teeth. If my wife gives me a note that says take the trash out, I'm probably going to take the trash out. Whereas if she tells me, I could say I forgot. I really can't say that, but I can try. It's really worried about it. But if you have an artifact and you establish a habit through that artifact, then you begin to create a way to build culture. Culture inside your organization, with your employees, or with people you work with on a regular basis. Culture outside your organization, with your customers, with your vendors, with your networking contact, with your business partners. Culture and habits together form the basis of our character. And I think it's appropriate at today's conference to mention that character is the basis of our destiny. Who we decide to be, and who we decide to be, especially when no one is looking, determines who we are. That drives us forward. I believe the foundation of business is not just financial security, it's not just product and service delivery, it's not just marketing, PR, although all those things are crucially important. I think the foundation is that engine of productivity. It is that choice of tasks that you make every day. How you build artifacts around those tasks, how you build habits, make those artifacts into reality, and how you transmit culture through those habits. That culture predicts your character, that character predicts your destiny. Thank you very much for your time.